The scorching afternoon sun painted the cracked driveway in sweltering gold. Each ray felt like punishment, a cruel reminder that the day wasn't kind, especially not to her. Grace knelt slowly, painfully, her swollen belly pressed tightly against the fabric of her threadbare dress as she bent over the bucket of soapy water. The bristles of the old car washing brush scraped her skin as she struggled to scrub the rear bumper. Her hands were trembling, not from weakness, but from pain and humiliation. Inside the house, laughter spilled out the open window. Her husband, Daniel, and his business associate Crystal, sat sipping cocktails, oblivious, or maybe willfully ignorant, to the sight of a heavily pregnant woman struggling outside, sweat soaking her hairline. Crystal giggled. "Doesn't she look pitiful out there? Honestly, I would have left you the second I hit the second trimester." Daniel grinned without shame. "She's used to it. She plays the martyr like it's her full-time job." Grace heard every word. She had grown used to pretending she was deaf, pretending she didn't care. But today, something inside her cracked. She looked at her reflection in the shiny rim of the wheel, eyes hollow, lips cracked, back arched not just from pregnancy but from carrying a decade of unspoken pain. And yet, she said nothing, because silence had become her armor. Later that evening, Grace shuffled through the narrow hallway of their once happy home. Every picture on the wall reminded her of a life that used to be filled with love, laughter, and promises. Now, they were just ghosts of moments Daniel had erased. She passed by the guest bedroom, catching a glimpse of Crystal sprawled across the bed, scrolling through her phone. "You missed a spot on the car," Crystal said with a sneer, not even looking up. Grace's lips trembled. "It's almost dark." And Crystal raised a brow. Daniel's voice boomed from behind. "Do as she says, Grace." Her hands clenched into fists, but she didn't argue. Not tonight. She walked back out, dragging her aching body, and picked up the bucket again. The street was quiet. Neighbors peeked through their curtains but said nothing. As always, her shame had become the neighborhood's entertainment. But deep within her, something stirred. Rage, maybe. Or was it the final push needed to wake her from a decade-long nightmare? 2 days later, Grace visited the clinic alone. The nurse looked surprised. "Mr. Daniels isn't with you today?" she asked kindly. Grace forced a smile. "He's busy." The doctor placed the cold gel on her belly and moved the scanner slowly. Grace watched the monitor. The heartbeat was strong. Her baby was perfect. A small tear escaped her eye. "You doing okay, Grace?" the doctor asked gently. Grace hesitated. "I'm fine." But she wasn't. On her way out, she caught her reflection in the hospital window again. This time, she didn't see a victim. She saw someone standing at the edge of a decision, a transformation, or maybe a storm. That night, someone knocked at the door. Grace opened it, expecting a delivery or a neighbor. Instead, it was her mother, Lydia. Stoic, proud, and wrapped in the scent of old lavender and tradition. "I heard you weren't doing well," Lydia said bluntly. Grace blinked, heart leaping. "Who told you?" "God did," Lydia replied. "And your sister. But mostly God." Lydia stepped inside, eyes scanning the messy living room and pausing on Crystal, who strutted in wearing Daniel's shirt. Lydia's nose twitched. "Where's your husband?" "In the shower," Grace whispered. Lydia turned to her. "We need to talk." Outside. They stood beneath the mango tree, where Lydia had once rocked her daughter to sleep decades ago. Now, it was Grace's turn to cry in her mother's arms. "I stayed too long," Grace finally confessed. "I thought he'd change. I thought if I loved harder." "No," Lydia said firmly. "You do not bleed for people who enjoy watching you suffer." And just like that, Grace knew this would be the last week she allowed herself to be broken. Upstairs, Crystal paced. She had grown tired of waiting for Daniel to leave Grace. The baby was coming soon, and Crystal didn't want a crying infant around. She had plans. Big ones. None of them included a wife. "I'll make her leave," she said aloud. Crystal took Grace's wedding ring, left on the kitchen counter, and dropped it into the toilet. She then replaced Grace's prenatal vitamins with sleeping pills. Then she smiled into the mirror. "Let's see how much you can take before you break." But what Crystal didn't know was that Grace already had. Daniel threw himself a party 2 days later. Expensive, loud, tasteless. Crystal was the hostess, pretending to be his fiancée while Grace cleaned up empty bottles and served canapés with swollen feet. A drunk guest turned to Grace. "You're the maid, right?" Grace smiled, tiredly. "Something like that." Crystal took the mic and toasted. "To the man I love, and the future we're building together. Cheers." Everyone clapped. Grace stood at the corner of the room, invisible, holding a tray of wine glasses. Daniel raised his glass. "And to new beginnings." The words hit her like a punch. New beginnings? Without her. No. She would give him an ending he'd never forget. The sky opened up, not with a roar but a quiet drizzle, as if even the heavens were ashamed to pour too heavily on Ada that day. She stood barefoot on the driveway, soaked through, her pregnant belly heaving gently beneath her wet gown as she wiped the car's bumper. The soap trailed off with the rain, vanishing like the dignity that had once clothed her spirit. From the window upstairs, Olivia, the mistress, stood sipping from a wine glass, draped in James' robe. She watched Ada with a mixture of amusement and disdain. Down below, an elderly neighbor across the street, Mom Nkechi, clutched her wrapper as she leaned on her cane, eyes narrowing. She whispered something in Igbo and shook her head. "That boy James will meet his day." Inside, James paced the living room, barking orders on the phone for a business deal that was clearly falling apart. He barely glanced outside at his wife. "She should finish before the rain gets heavier," he muttered. But the rain got heavier. And so did the silence between each of Adarora's labored breaths. Later that evening, a gentle knock came at the front gate. A stranger in a mechanic's uniform, young, humble-looking, stood with a wide umbrella and a kind smile. "Madam," he said softly, addressing Ada, "your friend at the market said you might need help. She sent me." Ada blinked. Her friend, Uchechi. That name lit something inside her. The young man, Chike, wiped his hands. "I can help wash the car. Or anything else. You shouldn't be out here like this." From the upstairs window, Olivia scoffed. "Tell him to leave, babe. He's not needed." But James hesitated. Something in Chike's posture, strong yet respectful, made him uncomfortable. "Let him help," Ada said simply. It was the first time she'd spoken all day. And in that moment, James felt something shift. That night, Ada lay in bed, back turned to James. He scrolled on his phone, chatting with Olivia, as if everything was normal. But the way Adarora's body didn't flinch, the way her breathing was steady and cold, it terrified him. "Why didn't you say anything?" he finally asked. Silence. Then she turned her face slightly. "What is there to say to a man who sees me as his maid, not his wife?" James stared at the ceiling, guilt creeping like mildew in his soul. But he didn't respond. Instead, he turned his back too. Two backs. Two people. One marriage already dead. Morning came with screaming. James bolted out of bed to find Ada collapsed near the car. Her water had broken. Blood mixed with soap suds on the pavement. Her hands clutched her belly as pain rippled through her. "Call an ambulance." Olivia screamed from the balcony, suddenly not so smug. But James didn't wait. He lifted his wife in trembling arms and drove like a madman through town. Chike followed behind on his motorcycle, praying aloud. At the hospital, James paced, wild-eyed. "She's 9 months. Why so much bleeding?" he shouted. The nurse just frowned. "You should have brought her sooner." In the waiting room, James sat with his head in his hands. Olivia had fled. Chike entered quietly and sat beside him. "She told me. You used to sing to her belly." James looked up, startled. She remembered, Chike said, eyes firm. Even if you forgot. James broke down then, not just from guilt, but fear. The doctor emerged. She's alive. But it was close. And the baby? James whispered. A beautiful baby girl. But you almost lost them both. Those words shattered James. Almost. Days later, Aurora lay in the hospital room, weak but calm. James came in holding flowers. She looked at him, expression blank. I'm sorry, he said, voice cracking. For what? She asked softly. For the car? For the mistress? For almost killing me? Tears welled in his eyes. For all of it. I don't expect forgiveness. She turned to the baby. She will know love. Even if it's not from her father. That hit harder than any slap. James knelt beside the bed. Let me try. Aurora didn't reply. She simply stared out the window, lost in thought. Olivia returned, arrogantly, to James' home, expecting status. But James stood at the doorway, baby in hand. Go home, Olivia. It's over. She scoffed. Seriously? After everything? James didn't flinch. You almost let her die. You're not welcome here again. As he shut the door, it felt final. He turned to see Aurora watching from the hallway. No smile. No warmth. Just silence. He knew forgiveness would be a journey. But it started with cutting off the poison. Weeks passed. James found a folded letter on the kitchen counter. It was Aurora's handwriting. James. You broke me. But I choose healing. Not for you. But for our daughter. I will raise her with strength. If you want to be part of that, earn it. No more games. No more cruelty. Start as a father. Then we'll see if you can become a man. He held the letter, tears dropping onto the ink. She was still giving him a chance. But this time on her terms. Months later, a community center opened in town. A women's outreach program led by Aurora. James stood quietly at the back, watching her speak. Strong, elegant, in control. She never mentioned him. But their daughter ran to him during breaks, laughing. He volunteered silently. Cleaning floors. Carrying chairs. Doing the work. Not for show. For change. And one evening, Aurora walked past him and whispered, "Keep going." Not love. Not yet. But hope. He'd taken her pain and turned it into his path. And in that transformation, redemption was no longer a dream. It had begun.